My apologies. Gotta love the mute button. Let me start that over again. So, good morning and thank you for joining us for today's webinar that will be presented by our Platinum Level affiliate, Lincoln Learning. Lincoln Learning will be educating us on the topic of accelerating student growth through high impact tutoring. My name is James Collins. I'm the Senior Director here at James Collins, Senior Director of Business Development here at CSBA, and I will be facilitating today's webinar. At this time, I would like to introduce our presenter for today's discussion, Dr. Catherine Dominguez, who has over 20 years in education in the education field and has served as an elementary teacher, a school teacher, and a curriculum developer, as well as a training specialist. So at this time, I will turn it over to you, Catherine. Thank you for joining us.
Hello and welcome everybody. I want to say thank you to the CSBA for hosting me. Once again, I'm Dr. Cat Dominguez. I've been in education for over 20 years as an elementary teacher and curriculum developer and now a trainer. I have my doctorate in educational leadership with a focus in STEM education. I'm also a wife and a mom of 2 daughters. I'm a hiker and a nature enthusiast. Today, my goal is to create a collaborative, engaging, and supportive space for professional learning. I'm very excited about what I have to share with you today. And in this webinar, we will dive into the key elements of high-impact tutoring, the steps to implement programs, and discuss some other strategies to make it successful. I want to start with a personal anecdote. When my daughter started 6th grade, she was about 1 to 2 grade levels behind in her math diagnostics. I was hoping over a few months within her class instruction, she would show improvement. However, by mid-year, there was very little improvement. And, sorry about that. So I decided that I was going to work with her at home because I knew she needed some extra help. So I began with printing out a 6th grade math packet, and we worked through it twice a week so that we can work on some of her skills. Sorry, give me a second. Here, I've lost my mouse control. All right, never mind, I got it. So within a few months, I saw that she had a significant growth. And by the end of the school year, she was on track to meeting her 6th grade math expectations. It was so effective that I even started doing it with my daughter. However, at the time, I didn't even realize I was practicing high-impact tutoring strategies. So let's start with a definition of high-impact tutoring. It is a personalized teaching method that uses ongoing learning sessions with a low student-to-tutor ratio. And it ensures an individual attention and tailored instruction. So you may have heard a couple terms, high dosage and high impact tutoring, and that it gets used interchangeably. So they do have a lot of similarities, but they also have some slight differences. I'm going to ask some questions just for you to kind of think about, but you don't really have to respond, to kind of tap into some of those characteristics. So which of these terms, high dosage or high impact tutoring, focus on the student experience rather than the student outcome? So you may have thought that high dosage tutoring centers around the amount of tutoring, not just the outcome. For another question, which tutoring strategy is centered around what the student is getting versus what the teacher is giving? The answer is high impact tutoring, since it focuses on what the student is getting, not what it is getting out of the tutoring. Of the 2 methods, which focuses on the results of the intervention rather than the amount involved? The answer is high impact tutoring, because the impact is measured by the student's learning results. For the last question, which method uses groups of 6 or fewer students? This is a little tricky if you don't really have much background in it. The answer is high dosage tutoring. So to kind of recap on some of those characteristics, some of the earlier studies focused on high dosage tutoring, which was an intensive, frequent session focusing on the student experience. And in high dosage tutoring, the groups are of about 6 students, whereas high impact tutoring focuses on the outcomes that are achieved through the intervention. And in these group sizes, they're up to 4 students or fewer. However, best practices combine both high frequency, intensive methods with a strong emphasis on measurable outcomes, and is also recommended to have four or fewer students. High impact tutoring has numerous advantages. It improves academic progress through marked academic gains. High impact tutoring is a proactive strategy where sessions are customized to meet students' needs for personalized instruction. It can also increase student participation and confidence. My youngest has expressed how she likes doing extra math at home because she understands what is being taught in class better. High impact tutoring has been a spotlight post-pandemic for educational recovery and to boost progress. Research from Harvard found that students need a half-year recovery in mathematics and a quarter year in reading. There have been a lot of studies, quite a few actually, that have shown its effectiveness. The National Student Support Accelerator graph highlights a multiple meta-analysis of over 150 studies. And from various analysis of these programs, it showed that high-impact tutoring added 3 to 15 months of learning. The key elements of these studies identified high-impact tutoring as intensive, relationship-based, and individualized instruction, resulting in substantial accelerated learning for students. So tutoring of different kinds are found all over the United States in schools. The Department of Education conducted a survey for the 23-24 school year, and some of its findings were that 66% of US public schools offer tutoring of some form, whether it was high dosage, standard, self-paced, on-demand online, or other methods, where only 18% did not offer tutoring at all. And 33% of these schools offered high dosage tutoring. In the same survey, leaders evaluated their different types of programs. They evaluated them as either being very or extremely effective, slightly or moderately effective, or not at all. I'm going to read some of the data here. So high dosage tutoring was evaluated as 52% very or extremely effective, and standard tutoring was evaluated as 27% very or extremely effective, whereas self-paced or on-demand tutoring was only considered 17 to 18% very effective, showing that high dosage tutoring was considered more effective than any other type. So evidence-based practices are integral to high impact implementation. Frequency and duration have shown to be critical to its effect. High dosage tutoring describes frequency as 3 to 4 times a week, totaling a minimum of 90 minutes per week. And the duration should be a minimum of 10 weeks to see an effect. It was around the 2-month mark that I started to see improvement in my older daughter's math skills. The National Bureau of Economic Research conducted a literature review of about 200 studies. When comparing high and low dosage tutoring, high impact tutoring was 20 times more effective for math and 15 times more effective for reading compared to traditional tutoring. The studies show significant positive impacts on student progress, resulting in 4 to 5 months of learning. Low student to tutor ratio is another evidence-based practice and crucial for effective high-impact tutoring. In a study comparing the effects of whole group versus one-to-one, greater positive effects on student reading achievement occurred with one-to-one tutoring. This affirms why my daughters are accelerating in their learning in math because of the one-on-one instruction they're getting alongside their whole group lessons. It is recommended that group sizes are about 4 students per tutor when using in-person delivery. For virtual tutoring, it shouldn't be more than 1 to 2 students because it can be more difficult for the tutor and students to connect. High impact tutoring encourages building a strong relationship. Well, this was definitely well established with my daughters. However, for their initial cooperation, I did use a little bribery because the parent-child dynamic can sometimes be challenging, but as we continued, I didn't need that bribery as much. With a strong relationship, students feel more comfortable to take learning risks when they're connected with their tutor. From another study, when there was a strong tutor-student relationship, then their school attendance increased. For this study, the students and tutors both completed a survey about their personal interests. The tutors used this information to connect with the student. The students in the treatment group had a higher attendance rate than those who didn't complete the survey, thus showing that building a relationship with a student was encouraging for students to want to attend school. Also, the National Student Support Accelerator reported that students were less likely to be absent on days with scheduled tutoring sessions. In contrast, with on-demand tutoring, only 19% accessed these resources, and the students who needed it the most did not use it, highlighting that consistency in relationships of high-impact tutoring are more effective. Besides frequency, small group sizes, and relationship-based approaches, other key elements of high-impact tutoring ensure an individualized attention and continuity. Data-driven practices, such as diagnostic tools, are used to identify specific content for each student. This is done by using baselines to measure students' current standing and correlated with formative assessments to confirm their instructional practices. It is recommended that a minimum of 2 data sources are used for guiding instruction to provide a personalized instructional based on data collection. Tutor support can be achieved through regular collaboration between teachers and tutors. Tutors get guidance from coaches or teachers for implementing best practices. Tutor support allows for a seamless integration. Another important element is using high-quality curriculum to support your high-impact tutoring programs. The curriculum should be standards aligned, rigorous, and relevant content. It should also be flexible in its delivery mode so it could be used either in person or virtually, and that the curriculum resources should focus on equity and inclusion and provide professional development that is created from evidence-based practices. Curriculum materials should also foster collaboration between teachers and students where learning is a shared experience. Another element of high-impact tutoring is its delivery mode, whether it's in person or virtual. In person is ideal because it's easier to build relationships and can be used for larger groups when you have a limited number of tutors. However, online and virtual tutoring has also shown to be effective, but only using 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 ratios. So in order to understand what something is, it can be helpful to consider what it's not. High impact tutoring focuses on acceleration, not remediation. It complements core instruction. It's not just reteaching content. In one instance with my younger daughter, we were working on how to round numbers a few weeks ago. I could tell she hadn't learned this concept in class. And at the time, it crossed my mind that maybe I was jumping too far ahead. However, just the other day, she came home from school ecstatic because her teacher had introduced the concept and she felt like she knew what she was doing and could share it with her class. High impact tutoring is a proactive approach that uses continuous data collection to foresee students' needs and address their educational gaps. It provides individualized instruction on current grade level content, whereas traditional tutoring is reactive and focuses on reinforcing foundational skills through review. High impact tutoring maintains a regular schedule and sessions are offered in school during school hours. It engages students 3 to 4 times a week with a proactive teaching strategy. Whereas traditional tutoring is often irregular, providing homework help or on-demand support before or after school. While I'm not using school time, I have specific days scheduled so that I don't forget to work with my daughters on their extra math content. And finally, high impact tutoring can really be used for all students, since all students can benefit from accelerating their learning, and it's not just for students falling academically behind. So I'm going to give you about a minute here to kind of take a moment to digest some of that information and also kind of get a chance to reflect. This is something you can just jot your responses down or have in the back of your mind. But I'd like you to think about what tutoring programs do your schools offer to your students and how effective are these tutoring programs? So I'll give you about a minute to think about this. You're going to start wrapping up your thought. So you may have mentioned or thought to yourself that your school offers tutoring mainly for homework help that's offered after school or virtually. So another thing to think about is, could your school potentially offer tutoring during your school hours? You also may have thought about certain groups of students who do take advantage of your tutoring programs regularly, but also realize that there's also a fair amount who are not able to use this resource. And I wonder if there are any ways that you've been able to try to get them more engaged and utilize their tutoring services. So you may be wondering how to implement high impact tutoring into your schools. So the initial planning can usually take months before it actually reaches into the classroom. And I want to mention that the National Student Support Accelerator Playbook has a lot of detailed guidance. I will go over some of the steps more briefly. So in the first step, this is where you would build a task force that will oversee your programs and set goals. It is advisable to also appoint a coordinator who will manage and organize all the pieces, and then setting clear goals so that the program has a focus. This is often done through a needs-based assessment of your school or district. And in this step is also good to identify your budget or funding sources so you know what resources you have to work with. In the second step, this is where you will design the program. You'll have to determine what frequency or duration your program will be, whether the tutors and students are working together 3 to 4 times a week, or how they're going to meet that 90 minutes a week, and also creating a schedule for your students and tutors to meet. This will definitely require some creativity and finding those windows throughout the day that tutoring sessions can take place. In designing your program, establishing what your student to tutor ratio will need to happen so that you know how many tutors you're going to be looking for, whether you're doing it in person or virtually. And also selecting your curriculum resources that are aligned to state standards. And the third step is where you will recruit and train your tutors. This can start with looking within your school or district for any teachers or paraprofessionals that can fill the role. And if needed, looking for external tutors, such as college work-study students, AmeriCorps members, volunteers, or tutoring organizations. And then providing your training programs so that your tutors are equipped with the necessary skills and have a good understanding of the program. And in the fourth step, this is where it comes into the classroom. So you'll be implementing all the planning that you worked through and bring it into the classroom. Once again, establishing your classroom schedule so that it's not affecting core instructional time, and then using formative assessments to continuously monitor students' growth and their needs. This is an iterative process since it is what will drive instruction in the tutoring session. So recruitment and training of tutors is a big part of implementing a program. The Department of Education survey identified that the #1 challenge for implementing high impact tutoring was finding staff. So this may require some creative strategies, whether you're looking for paraprofessionals, retired teachers, college students and grads, teachers in training, or community volunteers. Another piece of the recruitment is defining what qualifications and ideal qualities you will want for your program. So for example, if the main focus of your program is to improve students' math skills, then it's important that your tutors have strong skills in math so that they can support students in learning these skills. It is also important that they do have some basic understanding of pedagogy. This can also be addressed in the initial training. However, it's good to gauge whether they have an idea of how to best work with students. And some more on recruitment and training of tutors. When recruiting your tutors, understanding their background or experience working with students is important. So when hiring less experienced tutors, they should work with only 1 to 2 students, while more experienced tutors can have 3 to 4 students at a time. Also, their availability is really important since high impact tutoring emphasizes consistency. So tutors should be able to commit to a schedule that they're meeting with the same students regularly and for the intended amount of time of the program. Training should occur in the beginning before the program starts, just so that everybody has the similar foundation. However, continuous coaching should take place throughout the program so that tutors are supported and they can learn best practices and techniques to work with students. And in the entire recruitment process, it should follow your typical hiring process through applications, interviews, and it's the hope is that you can have about 4 times the number of applicants as the needed positions, so that way you have a good pool to choose from. So high impact tutoring is a data-driven practice focusing its direct instruction informed by data. So this starts with baseline assessments to diagnose students' skills and identify their needs, and then formative assessments are regularly used to check for understanding. With my daughters, I kind of make a mental note as we're working through things so I know what we should work on in later sessions, but there should probably be a more formal documented process in schools just to keep track of students' growth and their needs. Data can then be used to get an overview of student performance and also identify trends and gaps within classes or in the larger scale of the school. Measurable goals should be identified for specific student growth and created to personalize the approach for each student. This data is used to inform instruction with the goals in mind and adapted based on each student's needs. To monitor progress, feedback loops are a good way to monitor, and by using regular check-ins and adjusting strategies based on student progress. And finally, to evaluate your program effectiveness, it's good to use end of program or term assessments and compare them to baseline. High impact tutoring is a known effective strategy and can be used to address disparities and ensure that all students benefit. Otherwise, achievement gaps continue to widen. Targeted populations should be historically underserved communities that would benefit greatly from high-impact tutoring programs. Resources should be used in areas that will have the greatest impact. High-impact tutoring should be accessible to those who need it most. Traditional tutoring is often inaccessible due to after-school transportation issues. On-demand or online tutoring is rarely accessed by struggling students. Therefore, offering high-impact tutoring during school hours creates a more equitable access. Another avenue is to hire diverse tutors to reflect student diversity. This promotes a sense of belonging and empowerment. Other inclusive practices can also incorporate culturally relevant materials that include literature and examples of various cultures, along with featuring figures from diverse backgrounds. Differentiated instruction is another method where students have multiple ways to access information. It also gives them different ways to demonstrate their knowledge and varied ways to engage with materials. We're going to take another moment to reflect. So, just a couple questions to think about. Can you think of any specific students or schools that can benefit from high-impact tutoring programs? And what content areas do you think they will benefit from more instruction? I'll give you about a minute to just think about these and some of the information I shared with you. Maybe start wrapping up whatever if you're writing something down. So you may have thought of a specific student or a handful of students, or maybe your school state scores were lower than expected for math as a whole, and that these students or these schools could use the specialized instruction. Math and reading have been the #1 areas of focus in a lot of the studies, since those are some of the basic skills that students need to be successful in school. So who else can be involved? The National Student Support Accelerator gathered input from families and caregivers about their interest in getting involved in high-impact tutoring programs. And many expressed that they had a desire for involvement and would like to have a partnership with the districts in planning these programs. I am clearly an interested parent, but I had to figure out a lot of this out on my own rather than through my daughter's school. When involving parents or caregivers, it's best to have early engagement. This can be done by hosting informal gatherings where you can collect thoughts and ideas from parents and caregivers. It can also be helpful to create an advisory working group of these families or caregivers, and they can be helpful in reviewing and giving input on tutoring programs. They can also act as an advisory role to leaders for decision making. Parents and caregivers can also help build community partnerships. They're resourceful in connecting with potential partners, such as school-based staff, parent-teacher associations, faith-based organizations, community organizations, school board members, and after-school program staff. Communication is extremely important when in maintaining parent and caregiver support. Therefore, if there's a coordinator in place, they should ensure regular communication to all supporters. I'd like to share a few success stories. In the 22-23 school year, Aspire Parks Academy in Stockton, California, partnered with Ignite Virtual Tutoring Program. They provided 40 students with virtual one-to-one tutoring during the school day. Their sessions were 3 times a week with 45 minutes during each session. At the end of the semester, about 72% of students met their math learning goals. About 84% of students were excited to participate in math because of their grown confidence. In another tutoring scenario, the Oakland Unified School District partnered with Oakland Reach to recruit parents through community engagement. They trained 84 tutors in phonics since the focus of the program was to increase reading skills. And these tutors worked in small groups of 2 to 3 students, 3 to 5 times a week in 30-minute sessions. The kindergarten students who had tutoring made significant gains compared to those who had classroom instruction. And those who had tutoring gained a year's worth of reading growth, where those who did not have the tutoring had less than half a year of reading growth. So these are 2 different approaches of how they implemented high-impact tutoring, but they both showed success in different ways. So it just shows that when designing a program or going about bringing high-impact tutoring in your schools, it may look different from school to school or district to district, depending on the resources and how it's able to be structured. So technology can be leveraged to support high-impact tutoring. Some of the tools may be virtual tutors, educational games, and multimedia content. I'm going to share another study where students in the treatment group met with virtual tutors twice a week for 10 weeks, while also playing an educational game. The control group only played the game, and both groups completed the same pre and post tests to measure growth. In the treatment group, they had greater gains in math skills compared to the students who did not work with the tutors. They all did gain math skills using the game. However, the students had greater learning acceleration when they were working with a tutor. Multimedia content can also support high-impact tutoring, as students have opportunities to access content through videos, games, and interactive activities. Technology has many benefits. In some programs, it can produce data on student performance and can guide tutors to drive their instructional strategies. I've actually used some digital resources with my daughters that gives me data on where they're not scoring well, and it feeds us content to work on. So it saves me a lot of time for searching for resources. Tutoring or virtual tutoring is also beneficial in different ways in that it can provide a larger scale access since you have a wider radius to recruit tutors. So securing funding for high impact tutoring is essential to bringing it into schools. The National Student Accelerator Playbook offers some more guidance on how to work through some of the funding of your programs. One potential resource is in the 2025 federal funding budget. They propose $8 billion to be allocated for high quality tutoring that will be available for a 5-year period. This budget is still awaiting approval, so we'll have to see if these funds become available. However, title funds can also be used to support high impact tutoring. Many schools already have title funds allocated for other programs, so it may require just redesignating them. Title I can be used for high impact tutoring when serving high needs or low income populations. In fact, according to the Ed Week Market Brief Survey, 34% of leaders use Title I funding for their high dosage in-person tutoring. Title II Part A can be used to train tutors so they can effectively work with students. And Title III can be used when programs are working with ELL students, and Title IV Part A can be used for high impact tutoring when it's supporting student academic enrichment. State and local agencies may also have additional resources that can be accessed through each state's Department of Ed. Another source of funding have been AmeriCorps grants, where members are trained to specifically tutor students in economically disadvantaged schools. Another helpful resource is federal work-study students. It can be used to recruit tutors on a much lower cost. When I was tutoring or teaching, we had many study students in our classroom, and I actually often struggled to find tasks for them to do. I had wished I had known of this and tapped into these resources better. It would have been extremely helpful to have had them work as a tutor with the students. Many schools use a blended funding approach, combining multiple resources, and it's advised to exhaust restricted funds before using unrestricted funds. Schools and districts can create collaborative partnerships with higher education institutions to support their programs. It's important that there's an alignment between both parties and that they follow evidence-based practices. So creating these partnerships can occur through a couple different approaches. One approach is a recruitment model. This is where the school or district develops the tutoring program and the higher education institution helps recruit and train the tutors. Another model is the educator pipeline, where a college's educator preparation program, they develop the program and they train and coach their tutors, and then they bring their programs into the school. This gives college students opportunities to build their teaching skills. And in the third model, community engagement partnership model, this is where a college may be working on creating an outreach program with a local district, and the program might bring in some other community partners where they work together to develop a high impact tutoring program. Another type of partnership is with tutoring providers. This can help reduce a lot of planning steps for schools because they are experts in the tutoring field, where they are constantly improving their products and services. Many schools have created contracts with tutoring providers that are based on outcomes, so they only are paid when students are meeting their goals, and this helps ensures that resources are well spent. It's also important to note that not all tutoring programs have high quality curriculum materials, so this may be something that the school or district provides and ensures that it's state standard aligned. And these curriculum materials really need to be easy for students to find the content that they will need for their tutoring session. So educational practices are continually evolving. High impact tutoring has been effective for decades, adapting based on demands and circumstances. So some of the trends are that AI tutoring, or there's a lot of AI platforms being used in tutoring, such as chatbot, where students get real-time help for assignments, and then they get immediate assistance without having to wait for a teacher. Some other trends are that schools are using hybrid models. This allows them to combine online and in-person tutoring, and they may also be weaving in technology such as games or digital resources. Virtual or augmented reality is also becoming more common in tutoring, where students have immersive learning experiences and it helps them to better understand some difficult subjects such as science or social studies. And some more interesting trends in tutoring has been more research on the effects of social and emotional learning when students have high impact tutoring, since there has shown such an increased confidence in students for those who were initially insecure with their skills. So creating policies to support high impact tutoring can ensure its implementation. First, by prioritizing funding sources for its development and execution will pave the way for application. This is important that long-term funding is allocated so that services can be continued over multiple years. Policies should also include infrastructure to support districts in implementation, such as vetted tutoring providers, systems for background checks, and tutor training programs. Another area of policy could be focused on equitable distribution, so that those who need it most are getting the programs and prioritizing schools with low performing scores. And finally, maintaining quality control of programs would be essential to establishing standards that are consistent with research practices. So finally, I want to thank you for joining me for this webinar on high impact tutoring. And I also want to thank the CSBA for hosting me. I want to commend you on your continued commitment to improve education for all students. And just to review, high impact tutoring is a powerful solution to enhance academic achievement and learning recovery. It is an evidence-based practice that uses high-frequency sessions, one-to-one or small group, and focuses on relationship-based approaches. Implementation takes a lot of organization and recruitment to execute these initiatives and should be guided by data-driven assessment methods. And finally, to involve stakeholders will really help the success of your programs, where parents and community engagement can really be helpful. And for a final tip, I just want to remind you that the National Student Support Accelerator is a great resource for guidance on high impact tutoring implementation. So for a final reflection, and this is where we can use the Q&A, what are you still wondering about high impact tutoring?
Thank you, Catherine. So yeah, guys, typically this is where we open up for the Q&A session. Right now, I see there are none virtually, but I guess I would probably have some questions for you, Catherine. Like, what is a typical like setup for your product and services? Like, what is like a ramp up time? You may have addressed this in some of the slides, but how does that process typically work within a school district?
Like how long it would take to get it going?
Yeah.
So the initial planning would probably take at least a few months, primarily by identifying what the program focus should be, what classes or what schools it can be used in, and then recruiting tutors. Hiring process usually can take 1 to 2 months in general.
Mhm.
So I would think before school year, you should almost be working half a year beforehand to get all the pre-planning set up.
Awesome. And I remember when we first started initial conversations, I believe a lot of this is customizable too, right, to each student. Is that what I remember correctly?
Yeah, that's the whole idea, is that every student's needs are going to be different, because when they're learning something in class, some may be understanding some parts and some may be understanding other parts. So really identifying what those individual students need,
Mhm.
and having those tutoring sessions tailored for that specific student is what's going to really accelerate their learning.
Got it. Well, we do have a question that came in. Do you have any suggestions for high impact tutoring for online learners?
Yeah, so this is being used quite often, actually. So it would be similar to what you would do in the classroom. The difference would be then using it virtually. So you would have your regularly scheduled sessions. You would set up your time, your days, and you would then use whatever resources you have allocated, whether it's digital curriculum or other materials to work through your sessions. So it really can be done virtually. It's just a matter of just kind of changing that dynamic from in person to the virtual setting.
Got it. And this may be a silly question that just popped in my head too. So like, what does it currently look like in most environments? Like if I'm a student and I want tutoring, do I just like kind of like for my kid, like for math, we just ended up going somewhere else. But like how how would if I'm a parent or a teacher, how is the best way to engage with Lincoln Learning are the best way to learn more. Uh, that's kind of what I'm alluding to.
Yeah, so we don't actually offer tutoring directly ourselves. We
Okay,
provide more the digital curriculum to support the tutoring.
perfect.
So if you're a parent and you know your student is struggling, it would definitely be a conversation with your teacher. Um, it essentially, if high impact tutoring gets implemented as kind of a school wide or a classroom wide program,
Mhm,
it just gets built into the schedule. So a lot of elementary schools are finding certain gaps throughout the day where they will have designated tutoring time. A lot of secondary schools will block out an entire period where all students are in their tutoring
mhm.
sessions. So it kind of has some fluidity in that it can be adaptable depending on the circumstance. But the idea is that it's consistent throughout the day and in during school hours.
Okay, perfect. We do have a question coming in here. How do you schedule in class? How do you schedule in class that it doesn't take away from other programs slash content offering of the day? So,
So that's definitely the tricky part. Schools have done it in so many different ways. Some, like, they really had to sit down and analyze their day-to-day schedule and find where those small windows are. So some elementary schools found that there's kind of this kind of dead time, like 15 minutes before and after lunch. And so they've used that time to weave in the tutoring. Some have actually made their school day a little bit longer so that
mhm.
they could weave that session in throughout the day. The idea is if it can be done where it's not in like affecting instructional core time. Maybe there's a group of students who don't need the tutoring as much. They're doing some other kind of activity alongside these groups who are doing the tutoring. But yeah, it's really comes down to the school finding that creative space where it can be held.
Okay. And then another question came in. Are you still doing high impact tutoring with your daughter? And if so, what resources do you use?
So yes, I'm actually now doing with both of them because I just see that extra support. They are so much more confident in class, and it just keeps this like ongoing relationship of me helping them instead of becoming resistant if it's more like sporadic. Their school uses IXL, so that has been my primary resource because it tells us what areas they need to work on. It provides extra lessons. There are times that they're like, can we not do IXL? I want like on paper. So then because I've been working with them, I have an idea of what areas I need to work, and I'll just search printable worksheets that are online and we'll just work through those.
Okay. And then one question, what are typical questions that you run into that maybe you haven't heard yet today that probably should be addressed? Is there anything that we haven't thought of that, typically are asked when it comes to your product and services?
So our product and services, one of the things we are offering is the Lincoln Content Bank, and it is has over 100,000 resources for teachers or tutors to potentially use in their tutoring sessions. And it's searchable, so it's really easy to access these additional lessons that could be used in the tutoring. And so it just cuts out one of those big pieces of the puzzle where tutors and teachers have the resources at their fingertips all the time to support their tutoring.
Another question came in. Would you recommend making high impact tutoring part of a blended learning program?
Blended meaning like between online and in person.
I believe so. I
Yeah.
think it's like, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, if students need that extra, like, focused attention, I think it really can be helpful in any way. I know when I was doing some online teaching, sometimes some things get lost in the shuffle, and then I would schedule a couple sessions with the students and just help them work through a problem or whatever it was at the time. And I could just see the relief in them that it would really help them like make those connections and understand what they needed to do.
got it. We will leave it open for any other questions. We have a few more minutes here. Um, So we'll give it about another 30 seconds here. Kat, is there anything you want to add in closing?
Just that I appreciate everybody's attendance here today, and I hope this leaves you inspired. And yeah, that I think that this can be a really effective strategy to help students, and hope that this is helpful.
Yeah, and if there's any additional questions, we will also record those as well and make sure you get them. And we really, really appreciate your time. So thank you for everyone for joining us today. And thank you to our presenter, Catherine, as well. CSBA is dedicated to providing up-to-date resources to school board members. To view our recent webinars, be sure to check out our YouTube page at youtube.com/CSBA video, video. If you're interested in attending future CSBA webinars, please go to our website at www.csba.org/webinars. That's www.csba-org/webinars to register for upcoming webinars. Catherine, thanks again. Thank you for Lincoln Learning, and we appreciate your time today. And with that, we'll see you next time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.